He's a former Deputy U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Europe and Eurasia. He joins me now live from Lake Geneva in Wisconsin. Matthew, great to see you. Great to have you here with us on TRT World. You were also the former U.S. Ambassador to Azerbaijan, and I know that you were also involved in peace efforts in the region. So tell me, is this the most significant development that we are seeing in terms of peace efforts between Azerbaijan and Armenia?
Yeah, Jafar, always great to be with you. Yeah, it is. It is the most significant diplomatic step. You know, war is the continuation of politics by other means. That's a way of saying that wars end with diplomatic agreement. And so this is the penultimate diplomatic agreement. As you rightfully said, it's a framework agreement that will define concrete steps to bring the president of Azerbaijan and prime minister of Armenia, hopefully to the point of signing a peace treaty, the text of which was agreed in March. So that in itself is very significant. Also significant in a diplomatic sense is that the last issue that's preventing this signing of this peace treaty is Azerbaijan's understandable demand that Armenia amend its constitution such that the constitution no longer contains language that suggests that possibly Karabakh could be independent or part of Armenia rather than part of Azerbaijan. Prime Minister Pashinyan has said he believes Armenia should do that, but his political opponents have said that would be treason. Now, with President Trump's strong endorsement and support, he can go back to Yerevan and persuade his parliament. No, we really have to amend our constitution so we can secure this peace and then clear the way for investment and reintegration of Armenia's economy into the regional economy and the global one via this corridor you were just talking about. So yeah, this is the most significant diplomatic step, I think, in the history of the mediation of this conflict. I say that as a former U.S. mediator of the conflict, as you mentioned. And you know, truly the ending of the Second Karabakh War.
So, Matthew, as I understand, this constitutional amendment in Armenia remains the biggest stumbling block when it comes to the actual signing of a peace deal, right? Looking at the current political dynamics of Armenia, do you think Pashinyan can convince the Armenian parliament about holding this referendum?
Yeah, that's the key, Jafar. I mean, so far the answer has been no. But again, the fact that President Trump is now throwing his personal prestige and the full support of the United States government behind settling or getting to the peace treaty, and assuming that President Trump's advisors did the same thing that I did when I was a White House advisor on this conflict and informed the president of the actual concrete things that need to happen for there to be a peace. Now I believe, yeah, it is possible. There will be opposition. I mean, the opponents of peace in Armenia will remain opposed. I think Russia has suffered a debilitating, almost unbelievable strategic setback. Just that photo of President Aliyev, Prime Minister Pashinyan, and President Trump all doing the joint handshake when both countries, Azerbaijan and Armenia, had been so connected with Russia, and Armenia had depended for centuries on Russian security. And now the U.S. president steps in and is bringing the United States presence in as a peacemaker. That is an enormous strategic defeat for Russia, and therefore something I think we're going to see Russia opposing behind the scenes and trying to make it harder for Prime Minister Pashinyan to persuade his parliament to make that constitutional amendment.
And Matthew, what do you make of the Trump route for international peace and prosperity?
Well, it used to be called the Zangezur corridor in Azerbaijan. I think, first of all, that's creating that corridor, which links main Azerbaijan with the exclave of Nakhchivan via Armenia and then onward to Turkey. It's long overdue. Armenia and Azerbaijan committed to establishing it back on November 10th, 2020, when they signed the trilateral statement that created a ceasefire in the Second Karabakh War. They signed together with President Putin. So it needs to happen. The countries are committed to having it happen. And in that November 10, 2020 statement, Prime Minister Pashinyan and President Aliyev were, let's say, persuaded by President Putin to allow Russian border troops or security service troops to operate that corridor and provide security. Now it's going to be a U.S. company that is, or consortium that will operate that corridor with no Russian military presence. That's a huge change and a step forward for the sovereignty and independence of Armenia itself. One more point is, as you mentioned, in the strategic partnership agreement between the U.S. and Armenia and the U.S. and Azerbaijan, there's talk about cooperation on border security. That's phenomenal when it comes to Armenia, because until now, Russian border troops have guarded Armenia's border with Turkey. But now, if we're talking about the U.S. cooperating with Armenia and Azerbaijan on border security, we're into a whole new geostrategic realm. And I don't know what the details are, but those will be very important ones to take a look at.
Fascinating insights. Matthew Bryza, thanks very much for joining me here on TRT World. Really appreciate your taking out the time.
Thank you, Jafar. Always a pleasure.